Colleen, you're an award-winning editor, and that has to come in handy. That developed skill for editing a documentary, because everything we've talked about, we've already gone over so many techniques and so much information that you need to know beforehand and apply during production. Now you've got hours and hours and hours of footage to look through. Where do you even start?
Right. So, specifically with documentaries, I do start with the interview. I like to go over what the person said and pick out the selects of what is most impactful, what follows up with my story. I do think it's also really important that before you edit, you really internalize the the story plan or the script. So if you're editing a narrative, like you read the script over like 3 or 4 times so that it's like really in you. You give yourself a break and then you just edit without the script or the story plan. Just so when you it's actually kind of based off an acting technique. I forget what it's called, but you basically memorize all your lines so completely, you know the words. And so when you're acting, it's completely just how you feel and the intonation. And you're kind of doing the same thing when you're editing. You're not going like strictly based off the story plan or the script. You because you understand where it's going and you know what happens, and it's really just letting you exercise all your creative options and seeing what makes sense and what works and mixing and matching so that you're not just confined to how your director sees things. You're not just confined to how you saw things in pre-production, how you saw things in production. You're trying new things and you're open to all those possibilities. You kind of throw away all the preconceived ideas and you try something new.
Okay. I know when I'm editing things that are more of a documentary nature, I'll start with like an opening image.
Mm-hmm.
And, either if it's, say in Florida, like shot of Florida. Yeah. Just very easy, like establishing. But, also if I can, we'll try to find something that gives some insight that's a little more emblematic of what the story will be. And once I have that beginning, I feel like, okay, now I know where we are. Find the story, whether we've got a voiceover or we've got an interviewer, we try to track that and figure out, okay, this is the story I want to tell. And then I just place the images in and I see what works, what works over here, what needs to be spaced out. Where do the images or music take over? So I feel like there's so much at once. A documentary is a little more like organizing chaos.
Yeah, there's definitely that, which is why I start with the interview, because you can really figure out how that's going to lead and influence the story. I find that, well, with Geronimo, when the first image that starts out both of them, it's funny because they're not exactly establishing, but they're really striking.
Okay.
So in flight, it starts out with this extreme close-up of a moose head. It's just a moose from an animal sanctuary, and that's starting Kate's story as a veterinarian. And you're just like, what the heck does this have to do with anything? And the same thing with Circus Trash Monster. It starts out with Regina's foot because it was in the beginning of like her performance on the silks. And so it like tilts up to her doing, a trick. But it's just starting out with a foot. I don't know. It just made me laugh and it was striking. And so it's that's how you really lock on viewers, that you're like, what does this have to do with anything? Why are you showing me a foot? Why are you showing me a moose? But on top of that, Documentaries are so much fun because I think the B-roll part of it, arranging it, is is a lot of fun because when you're shooting it, there might not be a lot of meaning to it, but then layered on top of the interview is so impactful. So when I was editing Kate's, she says something about how um, yeah, she felt regretful of waiting for so long. And there's this one shot before like we really started shooting. She's just hanging on to her lyra and she's just standing there catching her breath and she's looking down, but like layered on top of that statement,
Mm.
it really inspires that feeling of regret.
Oh, that's powerful.
Right. And that's what's so amazing that these two very separate things, you wouldn't feel either of those things. And then layered on top, it's just it magnifies that feeling.
It's more than the sum of its parts.
Right. So meaningful B-roll is just amazing. And um, you really have to be creative in how you layer them. And that's what makes it so much fun. It's this never-ending jigsaw puzzle of trying to figure out what inspires an emotion in what place and what doesn't.
Mm. And with B-roll, you have to watch it all.
Yeah.
You went to time through all that time to shoot it, and now it's like, well, how can it be used? And where did I get the best shot of this? But then
Right.
you're right. You can go back and say, oh well, what if I took this shot that just like makes sense, and then I did a more like a creative spin on it. Like what if I showed like someone sad
Hmm.
at this point? Like what? How does that work? And you can take even just parts from the interview where they might just be a little quiet if that is representative of what's going on, and
Hmm.
even just layer that over, even if it's the person not speaking, over the person's voice. Like that's a creative way to say a lot.
Right. Yeah. So it's just being creative and knowing that you can always create like another sequence or another project and just flip things around and see how it's going to come out. But definitely like combing through all your B-roll and creating selects and like never deleting them until the end is so crucial because you only want to do it once, right? You only
Right.
want to go through hours and hours of B-roll once. And so you just pick out all of them and just flip them around to see whatever works best. And that's what's amazing. I used both performances from Kate and Regina's as ways to illustrate their struggles in both of their stories.
Okay.
And I think that was the best way I could have characterized them, really, because again, how I was saying about how aerial acrobatics is really difficult emotionally and mentally, and that was their outlet, that was their vehicle of change, and that using their performance for it really drove that point home.
Right. And do you think that that enables your viewer to more get in their headspace at the time?
Right. I think it definitely it opens people up to understanding who they are as a
Mm.
person, how that is helping them. Like it's not just another sport. It's not just another activity that they do. It's not just another facet of their personality. It's something that has changed. It's as much of a character in the story as they are, I guess.
Okay. Cool. Well, this has been a very interesting conversation. I'm loving it. So, where can our viewers and listeners see your work, or social media?
Right. So you can find more about Geronimo the series at Geronimo the series on Instagram and Facebook. And there's It's going to be in an online festival very soon, so you should follow up on that. And then if you want to see more about what I'm doing, I'm on Instagram at Cucumber Apocalypse. Very memorable name.
One of my favorites.
And yeah, I'm going to be directing another documentary in the winter. So everyone should look out for that.
All right, we will. And I'll put those links in the description.
Awesome.
Colleen, thank you so much for going into depth.
Thank you.